qualify that and say I was under, and I'll just pick my words carefully here, under the guidance of a security person of a local bar who is legally not allowed, that has no rights outside of their immediate doorway, but was able to talk me through what to do. And we sort of de-escalated the situation there. But that's also because I'm a very cocky person with a loud projecting voice. So I could make noise from a distance. I don't think we need to shame a courier driver for being frightened. Yeah.
I'm not trying to really, but I'm just interested in how we react, because I'm sure a lot of people would simply not, at least he went back and reported it, but a lot of people would simply not know what to do at all. And that sounds like this was similar in this case.
Yeah, although I suspect that if 2 or 3 people had gone over and tried to assist the young woman in the car, that probably he would have felt outnumbered and gone.
There's a thing called bystander effect, though, isn't there, that comes into play in those situations. Yes. That's where, well, I guess it's probably a bit late in the day to start talking about that, but if you Google bystander effect, listeners, you'll be able to find what I'm talking about.
Is it positive or negative in those situations? Positive. In other words, it's deterring.
Well, it's actually about how people often don't interfere in those situations because
nobody else is.
Because nobody else is.
They don't want to be the first to.
Yes, and it's actually about
do something proactive.
So you're right. If one person goes, then other people will come in. But that first initial person can be very difficult. Yeah.
There's also the aspect, although of course it doesn't excuse this, of the middle finger being a regular response on the road now. You see it more, and it probably invokes more rage than people realise. You know, people sort of use it carelessly, thinking it doesn't matter much. It's just a momentary expression of exasperation. But, of course, other people don't take it like that necessarily.
When you're a stand-up comic, you sort of become numb to it. I'm asked about it, Jim.
In the UK, a 15-year-old boy was caught at high speed on an electric scooter. It seems their scooters can go a lot faster than ours. It's the penalty that interested us. Because he's too young to have a driver's licence, they've added 6 demerit points to the licence when he gets one. Does this seem reasonable?
It seems a fairly toothless punishment, really.
Yeah, I mean, if he just hang on, kids. Self-driving cars are coming, and then you win.
That's right. Or 3 years. They probably disappear after 3 years. So he just needs to hang on a bit longer to get his real licence, and he's fine.
And does this seem reasonable? An Auckland man's begun a petition to make drivers sit another test when their licences are renewed, a practical and a written. Jeff Upson's his name. He says, we've got to do something about our poor driving. Is this the solution, panellists?
Can I be honest and say I don't drive, and so I've never sat a test, and so I'm incredibly underqualified to speak to this.
That's a really good answer.
It is a good answer. I don't think our driving is as bad as all that. I think that there's the odd occasion when things go, but it often depends too on just where your mind's at. I find that sometimes I'm a bit erratic, other times I think I'm a reasonable driver. We all probably need to concentrate a bit more.
Do you think this is one of the points he makes, that people accumulate bad habits they're not aware of? And certainly other drivers do. You can see it all the time.
Yeah,
but have you, do you think?
Yeah, I think we all do, yeah.
Okay. Not just in driving.
No, not just in driving. James Nakise, always lovely to talk to you.
You too, my friend.
Heather, always a pleasure to have your company. Heather Roy.
Thank you very much.
Have been on the panel today, and that's the last one for the week, but we are back on Monday. Have a lovely weekend, everybody, and Checkpoint is on the way.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's program, a record cocaine seizure in Auckland. 190 kilos of it found tucked away on a bent banana boat from Panama. So are we easy pickings for drug smugglers? Is a wave of white powder headed our way? Customs and police on the big bust. The number of people missing in California's deadliest wildfire has doubled to nearly 600. And who's in and who's out? Alex Perrottet delves into the fine print of the Royal Commission into historical abuse. Is it fair that scouts and young people jailed in adult prisons are excluded? The Brexit blues. Is the UK Prime Minister already in the departure lounge?
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Bat in aho. The New Zealand police are investigating possible local links to a record-breaking cocaine bust, but are staying tight-lipped about the details. Almost 200 kilograms of the drug were found in a container load of bananas that arrived in Auckland from Panama in August. Eva Corlett reports.
Australian officials tipped off New Zealand after investigating an Australian-based organised crime group. The cocaine is said to be worth around $36 million, and the find is the biggest drug bust in New Zealand. A 41-year-old man has since been arrested and appeared in a Sydney court. Police here won't say whether New Zealanders have links to the Australian group because investigations are ongoing. They say they're seeing more illegal drugs leaving North and South America bound for places like New Zealand. Authorities estimate the combined community harm from the drugs would have been $235 million. Ko Eva Corlett, Tēnei.
The man accused of murdering Arishma Chand admits he was driving on her street around the time she was killed. Ms Chand was found stabbed to death in her Manurewa home in the early hours of November the 12th last year. Rohit Deepak Singh is on trial in the High Court in Auckland. In an interview with the police the day after her death, Mr Singh said he was driving down Ms Chand's street around the time she was murdered.
You put yourself in the place she was murdered at the same time.
So you mean I have done that?
Explain to us why you were there in the area around the time that she is.
It's not me.
Rohit Deepak Singh told the police officers he had just been cruising in the area in his car that night. 2 students have been injured in a classroom explosion on Auckland's North Shore. Emergency services were called to Pinehurst School in the suburb of Albany shortly after 3 this afternoon. Tom Furley reports.
The police say it appears the explosion happened during an experiment involving a plastic pipe. The fire service has now left the school and says the fire was out when crews arrived. St John has taken 2 students to North Shore Hospital where they're being treated for minor and moderate injuries to their legs. This is Tom Furley.
A week of rolling one-day strikes by members of the Educational Institute finished in the Wellington region today. The strikes have closed primary and intermediate schools throughout the country since starting in Auckland on Monday. The union's members are now preparing to vote on the most recent offer from the Education Ministry. Alistair Button was one of several striking teachers who told RNZ News the offer is not good enough.
I think the improvement is very slight, and I think unless there's a substantial improvement in the offer, we need to continue with our action. I think there probably is more money, there's a surplus, and they've also have various self-imposed restrictions on their spending that they could relax.
Wellington teacher Alistair Button. The Education Ministry says its offer would increase most teachers' pay by $10,000 within 24 months. A Taranaki environmental group is horrified at a decision to ship the region's waste hundreds of kilometres away to the Bonnie Glen mega dump near Martin. The Stratford, South Taranaki and New Plymouth District Councils say the deal offered by waste company Midwest Disposals will save ratepayers $25 million over 35 years. Climate Justice Taranaki spokesperson Emily Bailey says simply focusing on the bottom line isn't good enough.
It's disgusting. Like, we should not be trucking waste 3 hours down the country and then 3 hours back. We need to deal with it here, and we need to really be pushing towards zero waste.
Emily Bailey says Midwest is owned by trucking companies Waste Management and Enviro Waste and has a vested interest in keeping the trucks busy. The deal also means development of the $42 million Central Taranaki landfill near Eltham will be suspended. The councils have spent $7.5 million at Eltham so far. A man has been taken to hospital with moderate injuries after a harness racing crash in Christchurch. 3 horses collided during the show day races at Addington Racecourse this afternoon, sending one driver flying out of his cart and stopping the race. Head of Addington Raceway, Peter Jensen, says the horses involved have been vet-checked and cleared, and the race has been rerun. It's 5:04. Sport, the Central District spinner Azaz Patel is set to make his Test debut for New Zealand in the series opener in Abu Dhabi tonight. Patel is likely to be the second slow bowling option behind Ish Sodhi, with the New Zealanders to name their 11 just before play starts at 7. The 30-year-old Patel has been the leading Plunket Shield wicket taker for the past 3 years, and he's confident he can use the slower wickets in the UAE to his advantage.
It's still hard work for spinners, you know, it's that longer game and it's that longer time that you have to spend making sure that every ball's the right ball that you bowl. I'm used to bowling long spells, so, you know, that's a challenge that I'm going to enjoy out there. Obviously it's a different intensity, so, you know, everything's going to have to jump up a little bit, but it's definitely something that I feel comfortable doing.
Azaz Patel, the test begins at 7 o'clock tonight. Meanwhile, career best figures of 3 for 9 from spinner Jess Watkins helped the New Zealand women's cricketers to their first win at the T20 World Cup, beating Pakistan by 54 runs in Guyana. But having lost their 2 previous games, the White Ferns failed to qualify for the semi-finals. The Black Fern Sevens have suffered a major setback in their World Series campaign, with try-scoring sensation Portia Woodman facing 6 months on the sidelines after suffering an Achilles injury. Woodman was injured at training earlier this week and was due to have surgery today. The side flies out tomorrow for the next leg of the Women's Sevens World Series in Dubai later this month. That's the news.
Coming up tonight, Unknown Mortal Orchestra are our Friday night live act. We've got a web fest for you this weekend, as in online web, but there's something as ubiquitous as the web need its own festival. And because the only man to hang for it in Aotearoa died on this day in 1869, we have a sonic tonic dedicated to treason. That's Nights with me, Brian Crump, from after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
Met surface weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, fine spells and isolated showers. Whanganui, Manawatu, the Central High Country, Bay of Plenty, also Gisborne to Wairarapa. Fine spells and isolated afternoon and evening showers about the Central High Country and the ranges of Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Horowhenua to Wellington, cloudy periods. Nelson and Marlborough, fine today, apart from low cloud about the Kaikoura coast. Scattered rain developing tomorrow morning. Bulla and Westland, a few showers turning to rain with heavy falls from the south this evening. Canterbury, scattered rain developing this evening, easing to isolated showers tomorrow morning. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, rain today with heavy falls, scattered showers tomorrow. Showers possibly heavy in the eastern parts of Otago and Southland tomorrow afternoon. And the Chatham Islands, fine today, becoming cloudy tomorrow. It is 5:05 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
And I'm Lisa Owen. It was ripe for the picking, almost 200 kilos of coke, the illegal Class A kind, tucked in plain old duffel bags chucked on top of bunches of bananas on a ship from Panama to Auckland. A joint operation between New Zealand and Australian authorities and some serious sleuthing by our Customs Department saw the haul nabbed in Auckland in August. The investigation's still ongoing, but in the last 24 hours a man's been arrested in Sydney. And our police are warning New Zealand is a lucrative market for mainly South American cartels looking to offload their product during a worldwide drug glut.
The backdrop for the joint Customs Police announcement is a mini retaining wall built with tightly wrapped 1 kilo bricks of cocaine. It's sandwiched between ESR evidence bags that at first glance appear to be full of sugar.
This is New Zealand's largest seizure of cocaine. What you see here represents 190 kilograms of cocaine.
Detective Inspector Paul Newman. His focus is organised crime, and this apparently was well organised. The goods were stashed on a bent banana boat that left Balboa, Panama, the home of coffee, that famous canal, and cocaine.
A container listed as a shipment of bananas arrived in Auckland, New Zealand on a vessel from Balboa, Panama. A task force of Customs and Police inspected the container and found 5 duffel bags on top of the banana boxes which contained the 190 kilograms of cocaine.
New Zealand authorities got a heads up from the Aussies and used a kind of profiling to find the boat and the coke in the banana stacks when the ship pulled into Auckland late August. A 41-year-old has been arrested in Australia. Our police won't talk about that bit. As for the street value of this haul, authorities estimate it's $36 million. Ross Bell from the Drug Foundation puts that in context.
It's about $350 a gram, which is a lot of money. But compare that to methamphetamine. Meth is anything between $600 and $800 a gram, so that's a very lucrative drug as well.
As for social harm, here's Bruce Berry from Customs.
The community harm posed by this consignment to the Australian and New Zealand communities is estimated at around $235 million. The shipment of cocaine itself is valued at between $28 and $36 million by New Zealand money. This may well be New Zealand's largest seizure of cocaine this year, and it eclipses the 46 kilograms seized in Tauranga last year by police and customs. New Zealand and Australia continue to have some of the highest prices for cocaine internationally, which makes us a viable market for these products.
But Ross Bell says that number's been plucked from research that was never intended to be used this way.
It's really misleading and they know it.
Why do you think they use it then, Ross?
Well, it looks good.
Police and Customs concede most of this haul was probably headed across the ditch. But Detective Inspector Newman reckons New Zealand's still a destination of choice for smugglers.
I think what you're seeing here is the targeting from South American crime cartels and gangs that see Australasia and New Zealand as a particularly lucrative market because of the prices we pay. They can afford to send large amounts and small amounts to our country, lose some and still make large profits.
Ross Bell has a different take.
If the gangsters thought that it was a lucrative market and suddenly swamped the market with a whole lot of supply of cocaine, then the price is going to drop. So, the logic is a bit iffy, I think.
New Zealand authorities believe there's signs the drug market is moving away from meth towards ecstasy and cocaine. But the Drug Foundation's not expecting a tsunami of coke and is more concerned about unknown powders cooked up mainly in China.
This whole approach that we take, that we're going to tighten our borders and stop this stuff coming in, we're on a merry-go-round here, and if we want to get off that, then the best approach is to start addressing New Zealand's drug problem as the health issue that it is and focus on the demand side.
And a footnote to that story, if you were wondering if the recent banana shortage was in any way connected to that operation, it wasn't. It's been a huge day of Brexit turbulence in London. The British Prime Minister, Theresa May, is facing a major revolt in her Conservative Party over the terms she's negotiated for the UK's withdrawal from the European Union. 2 cabinet ministers, including Brexit Secretary Dominic Raab, have resigned in protest, along with 2 junior ministers and 2 ministerial aides. And talk is mounting of a leadership challenge. A battered Mrs May has appealed for party unity, saying she believes with every fibre of her body that the deal is the right one. The BBC's political editor Laura Koonsberg has the report on the day's development.
On exactly the spot where Theresa May took on the job of Prime Minister.
Rather than in a leave
the march of the Brexiteers, trying to walk her to the exit.
What we need is a leader who will say to the European Union, it is impossible to divide up the United Kingdom. It is impossible to agree to a situation where we have a perpetual customs union.
Those who still back her exasperated.
Stop rocking the boat, stop wrecking, otherwise this will prove an historic, disastrous period, not just for the Conservative Party and the government, but for the country.
But she's still there, even with resignations and open revolt. Can she stay? She'll try.
Serving in high office is an honour and privilege. It is also a heavy responsibility. That is true at any time, but especially when the stakes are so high. I'm going to do my job of getting the best deal for Britain. I'm going to do my job of getting a deal that is in the national interest. When the vote comes before the House of Commons, MPs will be doing their job. And am I going to see this through? Yes.
She's just made it plain she wants to stay, that she may have to go. With her party in revolt, colleagues departing, some organising to try to shove her from office. This decision is not Theresa May's alone. This could be a gale that sweeps through in a couple of days, or a storm that brings the Prime Minister and her government down. And she can't ignore this. Listen to the now departed Brexit Secretary condemning the deal. Dozens and dozens of his colleagues hold this view.
I fought very hard to get a deal that I could in good heart and good conscience take to the country and to my colleagues. But actually, if you look at what's being proposed now, it is not only, in my view, damaging to the economy, but it's impossible to reconcile with the promises we made at the last election.
Statement, the Prime Minister.
And beyond departed colleagues, is it realistic to expect Theresa May can get her version of Brexit through Parliament?
I do not pretend that this has been a comfortable process, or that either we or the EU are entirely happy with all of the arrangements that have been included within it. Mr. Speaker, when I first became Prime Minister in 2016, there was no ready-made blueprint for Brexit. Many people said it could simply not be done. I've never accepted that.
But watch her colleagues, half of them cheering, half of them arms crossed, hardly knowing where to look. Then 57 minutes of bitter complaint after bitter complaint.
The government must now withdraw this half-baked deal, which is clear does not have the backing of the Cabinet, this Parliament or the country as a whole.
But like it or not, it is in this circus that the government's future will be decided.
Oh, I've done it again.
In a moment of the absurd, Theresa May cracking a joke during an intense crisis. The Prime Minister at the mercy of others, but still in place.
And that was the BBC's Laura Koonsberg reporting from Westminster. The number of people missing in California's deadliest and most destructive wildfires has doubled to almost 600. Another 7 bodies have also been found, taking the death toll so far to 63. The Camp Fire erupted a week ago and raged through the northern town of Paradise, literally wiping it off the map. The fire is now 40% contained, but 50,000 people remain under evacuation orders. The President Donald Trump is due to visit the state at the weekend as some residents launch legal action against a local power company. CNN's Scott McLean has more.
Tonight, hundreds of searchers and more than 20 dogs digging through what's left of Paradise, California. And there isn't much. They're looking for human remains amidst heaps of twisted metal and piles of ash. Officials say many bodies recovered so far have been burned beyond recognition. So burned, it's difficult to tell if they're even human.
We're trying to determine the difference between human remains and non-human remains, because it can be extremely difficult in these fires to make that differentiation for those of us that are untrained.
The sheriff's office is keeping a list of those unaccounted for. They're hoping to find them alive, but expect the death toll to rise. Now, some are already assigning blame. 22 residents who lost their homes in the fire are suing the local power company, Pacific Gas and Electric, saying the company was aware of problems with sparks from their transmission lines in the area of origin of the campfire. CAL FIRE has not determined the cause of the campfire, and it could be months before it's known. Earlier this year, CAL FIRE determined that PG&E was responsible for 12 wildfires across 6 counties in California. For Butte County, some positive news.
Through our ongoing efforts, we have been able to locate or determine that over 200 people that we thought were missing or weren't accounted for are not.
But a week after the mass exodus of more than 20,000 people from Paradise, there are only so many places to go. Some shelters are full. For others, they just don't want to go there. Jennifer Fitzgerald and her 7-year-old daughter lost their home in the fire. Jennifer's job doing home care is gone too. The pair spent the night sleeping inside of a friend's car in a Walmart parking lot. She's not the only one suddenly calling this refugee camp home.
It could be worse. It could be sleeping out here where it's way freezing with nothing, like a lot of people have been.
That's exactly what Laura Whitaker is doing, sleeping outside in a tent with her grandson Eli.
Very cold. It's been like 30 degrees at night. Yeah.
Didn't sleep, not last night. It was so cold, and I just kept myself completely wrapped around him.
9-year-old Eli is putting on a brave face. He'll be homeless until his parents can save enough money to buy a trailer.
It's hard.
What do you miss most?
Just being in a bed.
And that was young California fire victim Eli ending Scott McLean's report from the devastated Northern Californian town of Paradise. Bank sales staff across the 9 biggest retail banks in New Zealand earned $71 million in variable pay linked to performance measures in the year to March. Now, before your eyes glaze over, what does that mean? Well, in plain English, they got an extra $71 million in bonuses and incentives for selling you loans and products from the banks. That's 9% of their total pay. And the Financial Markets Authority found that staff were incentivised to encourage customers to borrow money, invest or take out more insurance through their banks that they may not need or actually want. The behaviour of big Australian-owned banks has come under scrutiny across the ditch, but would we expect Kiwibank, the bank that says it's for New Zealanders by New Zealanders, to be doing the same? The CEO of Kiwibank, Steve Yukovic, joins me now. Hi there. Can you tell me what is the incentives that you offer your staff for selling product on the front line of your bank?
Hi Lisa, look, there's a range of incentives across the whole organisation. One of the things that we've committed ourselves to was, rather than make some sort of decision about, it's a certain class of team member that might be subject to those sorts of that scrutiny or review, we've gone from, my role right through to everyone in the business. So we certainly take the findings seriously that came back from FMA and RBNZ. We've been working on it for about 6 months. We got the report last week. We're getting an individual report next week. Those are all important factors. You also have to bear in mind that people do have individual employment relationships with us, and so it's not just a matter of a broad brush change.
Okay,
we have to respect the individuals.
I get that. But my question was, what are the incentives that you offer sales staff? What percentage do they get paid of what they sell, or how does it work? Talk me through it. What are the numbers?
Oh, sure. So, there's a balanced scorecard about the outcomes. So in some roles, there'll be around making sure that the customer satisfaction is high. In others, it'll be making sure that a certain number of reviews are done of customers to make sure their needs are being met. So it's a real balance between how many conversations are going on and what sort of conversations we want to have with those customers. So it's really hard to give you sort of one view, because a business banking business relationship manager will have a different scorecard to a frontline teller.
Okay, well, let's use a simple example. If I sell you insurance, do I get a percentage of what I sell you? Like 30%, for example?
No, you don't. You'd have to ask the insurance industry about the direct remuneration, but no one at Kiwibank's on that sort of arrangement. Okay,
so the FMA says on average that staff get an extra $6,000 through incentives. Would that be a fair representation of what your bank is doing too?
Look, I think as a percentage we would be significantly lower than the industry, but there will certainly be frontline staff who receive that sort of amount.
Okay, the big Aussie banks, they have said that they've taken those incentives away from their frontline staff. Why is Kiwibank following in this and not leading?
Well, it's a great question and great challenge. I think a fair one, Lisa. From my perspective, I don't think deciding that frontline staff who are dealing with customers changes the behaviour of the whole organisation. So my very strong view is that from chief executive through to our frontline teams, everyone's incentives needs to be reviewed, and that everyone needed to be considered in the context of, are we driving for the great customer outcomes we're after? So I don't think particularly picking on branch staff or business banking staff and then not tackling general managers and executive general managers makes a lot of sense.
Appreciate that, but obviously customers would wonder why you don't make the immediate changes right now. You can do it in a staged way. Your bank says Kiwi values at heart. So are those customers, are they at the heart of those values?
Oh, I think they are. Look, I'm really confident. And I think
then why not do something straight away?
Well, I think you need to make sure that you really are incenting and rewarding the right behaviour. I'm certainly not aware of, and our work didn't reveal any situation where an incentive was playing a part in a customer not getting a great outcome.
Well, the review actually said that overall some customers were being sold products that they weren't being fully informed about. Some of the examples they give are that they were swapped to credit cards that were more costly. They were switched to products where the fees were not explained to them, and that's the overall report. Are you saying that your bank didn't do any of that stuff?
Oh, no, I don't think any bank can say that, Lisa. I think there will always be, when you've got 1 million customers, there's always going to be a situation where a customer's needs are misunderstood or a team member had a different idea about what they were trying to achieve. So certainly not from my perspective. What I can say is we take it super seriously. My commitment is I don't want any customer ever feel that we've tried to push something on them. I know the ratings there showed us as the least likely to be doing that, but regardless of that, I think we have to be very, very open-minded and embrace that scrutiny. And look, public opinion is, obviously strongly against that sort of situation. We take that seriously and we will act on it. I just want to really understand the full report.
Mr. Jukovic, what deadline are you giving yourselves to get rid of these targets?
By the end of our financial year, we will have resolved and put in play with our own team what the structures are that we're going to go forward. But, to be fair, our team will be the first people we speak to rather than the public about that.
All right, appreciate you joining us this afternoon. That is the CEO of Kiwi Bank, Steve Jukovic, there, talking about the fact that, Kiwi Bank is still offering incentives to their staff for selling financial products. An Auckland secondary school principal says banning school prize givings at a primary school level could be damaging to students. Silverdale School and Stella Maris Primary on the Hibiscus Coast have both scrapped their end-of-year prize givings because they don't want to upset children who miss out. But the headmaster of Auckland Grammar says life's full of winners and losers, and schools need to be too. As Matthew Tunison reports, it sparked a lively debate.
The bell's just rung at Silverdale Primary School and the students and their parents seem pleased they won't be having a prize giving this year.
I think it's not fair if one kid gets the prize, so I think it should be cancelled.
It's a wonderful idea because the kids that get prizes, it's generally only the top few percent of the school, and all the rest of those kids sit there and get nothing year in and year out.
You're just trying to get your kids to be good kids, and I'd prefer those values.
School principal Cameron Lockie argues that children should try to succeed because they want to, not because of rewards that he calls subjective at best. At nearby Stella Maris Primary, they've also got rid of the end-of-year ceremonies. Principal Alan Watts says it tends to be the same kids who win prizes, which isn't particularly motivating to the other children.
I think we've got to move to children working for an intrinsic reward rather than an extrinsic reward, and I don't believe in primary that children actually sit down and think, well, I'm going to work for the end of year best all-round medal in whatever.
Secondary school Auckland Grammar has a reputation for its competitive environment, with classes streamed according to academic achievement from A to P. Headmaster Tim O'Connor made no apology for recognising students' success at their annual prize giving, and he's not too impressed with the Silverdale School's position.
I'd describe that sort of behaviour as politically correct and in fact damaging to student pathways from primary into secondary schooling and actually, beyond that into life. The reality is your school may have done away with winners or losers, but life hasn't.
Clinical psychologist Catherine Gallagher also thinks that in their desire to protect children, they risk actually doing harm.
It's absolutely essential for kids to experience failure. Actually, life and learning is about failing and going, oh, that didn't work, I've got to try it some more, or I've got to try something different or a different approach. And if we are so busy protecting our kids from the experience of failure, then we are doing them a disservice.
At the same time, she says people's self-esteem and sense of worth shouldn't be tied up with winning prizes. She says she's more likely to see someone who strove to be top of the class sitting opposite her in a psychologist's chair than someone who, while perhaps not a high achiever, accepted their lot in life.
I've got lots of young people who come through my door who have never had an experience of failure and don't know what the hell to do with it when it turns up.
But Jenny Poskett from Massey University's Institute of Education says the principals who scrapped the prize givings are courageous for going against convention. She says prize givings can be positive if they're given out fairly and through a transparent process, but can also be very tough for kids who miss out.
If it's done well and the community involved in the decision understand why and receive
useful and accessible information about the progress their children have made and acknowledgement of the different strengths and attributes and personalities they have, then there's no problem.
That's why getting rid of them altogether could be a good thing. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Matthew Tunison tēnei.
And coming up, Scouts New Zealand and other groups say they're disappointed victims of abuse in their communities won't be heard by the Royal Commission. The All Blacks prepare to face off against Ireland, and we look at the nationwide movement of communal food pantries. We would love your feedback, especially on school prize givings. Should they be scrapped? Don't forget, you can text us on 2101, you can tweet us at CheckpointRNZ, Facebook us, Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@radionz.co.nz. With all those options, there is no excuse. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
A 41-year-old man has been arrested in Sydney after a record-breaking drug bust in New Zealand. The police today revealed how 200 kilos of cocaine worth around $36 million was found in a shipment of bananas that came into Auckland in August. That had been tipped off by an Australian official who were investigating an Australian-based organised crime group. 2 students have been injured in a classroom explosion on Auckland's North Shore. Emergency services were called to Pinehurst School in the suburb of Albany shortly after 3 this afternoon. The police say it appears the explosion happened during an experiment involving a plastic pipe, and the boys are being treated for moderate injuries to their legs. The death toll from California's most deadly and destructive fires has risen to 63, and the number of missing has dramatically doubled to almost 600. The Camp Fire erupted a week ago and completely destroyed the northern town of Paradise. A week of rolling one-day strikes by members of the Educational Institute finished in the Wellington region today. The strikes have closed primary and intermediate schools throughout the country since starting in Auckland on Monday. The union's members will soon vote on the most recent offer from the Education Ministry, which says it would increase most teachers' pay by $10,000 within 2 years. A magnitude 6.6 earthquake was recorded east of the Solomon Islands this afternoon. The quake was 33 kilometres deep and did not lead to a tsunami alert. A man has been taken to hospital with moderate injuries after a harness racing crash in Christchurch. 3 horses collided during the show day races at Addington Racecourse this afternoon, sending one driver flying out of his cart and stopping the race. The raceway says the horses involved have been vet checked and cleared. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
And you're listening to Checkpoint, and I'm Lisa Owen. Time to get down to business with Madison Reedy. So directors, they've had their say on the economy and they're feeling a little glum about things.
They're glum and they're gloomy, which is no surprise because this is obviously what we've been hearing all year from business confidence surveys. This one specifically was just directors, so the people at the very top at the board level of some of our largest listed companies, also state-owned enterprises and government organisations too. So this is the Institute of Directors and ASB together. Every year they do a director sentiment survey. Now this year it was the first time in 5 years, the entire history of these two organisations doing this survey, where the amount of directors who are pessimistic about the economy, who expect it to worsen, was actually greater than the number who expect it to improve. So 43% aren't feeling so great about the economy, and only 17% are feeling like things will get better.
And why are they so down in the mouth about it?
Obviously, a change in government does have a lot to do with it, but also we saw roles reversed when it came to their own organisations. And this is something that we've seen across all business confidence surveys, all of these companies and their leaders saying that, you know, we feel sad about the economy, we don't like what's happening, particularly when it comes to business confidence, decisions like the ridding of oil and gas exploration permits, how businesses weren't necessarily consulted on that as they think they should have been, so businesses were unhappy about decisions like that. Also the rise in the minimum wage, the regional fuel taxes, all of that is rising cost that has to go into their books and, you know, come out of their wallets as well. So that's typically the type of thing that makes businesses not confident. But at the board level, they were specifically concerned about shortage of labour and quality of labour, so not being able to find enough or good enough staff, and also regulatory red tape, which is very consistent whenever there's a change in government. They're always concerned about how much more red tape are you going to put out there for us to have to cut.
Well, as soon as you mention petrol tax, regional petrol tax, not as much pain at the pump at the moment. Why?
Certainly less pain at the pump, and this is all of these geopolitical factors that play into what that price is that we actually see at the pump and what we have to pay for it. So the price of Brent crude oil has actually dropped over 20% in just a matter of weeks. So last month in October, it actually hit a 4-year high, which is, you know, a massive amount per barrel of crude oil, both the US crude and also the Brent crude that we buy internationally. But last month, recently, that high from last month has been entirely wiped. So now we're actually back at the same price that we were paying at the start of the year. That's obviously great news for fuel companies, so they have been able to ease the pressure at the pump.
Yeah, but have they eased the pressure at the pump to the same degree the price is eased for them?
I put that question to Z Energy's chief executive yesterday, and we don't know the margin that fuel companies take in their cut from the price of petrol. Obviously, you know, they always say that it's fair, but they do need to remain competitive. But then also competitiveness does keep their prices pretty low. They also have businesses to run, so they do have to take a cut to be able to even pay for the petrol station down the road from your house to stay standing and to have somebody there to help you put the petrol in your car. But Z has dropped the price this week by about 6 to 8 cents on average. In some areas of the country where it could be dropped lower, where there's less competition, it was dropped by about 30 cents a litre. There was also that announcement today from Waitomo Fuel. They're dropping unleaded 91 down to $2 a litre across the country this weekend.
So prepare for the rush. What about the markets today and Brexit? I imagine that's playing a bit of a role with the dollar.
It certainly is. It's certainly kind of throwing the dollar around. So the NZX Top 50 Index, our market closed down. Wall Street had a really good day when it closed this morning, but we didn't see many of those gains. So we were down 0.2%. That's 16 points to 8,809. The New Zealand dollar is buying at 68.2 US cents. We're back over that 68 cent mark there, really strong against the US. 93.9 to the Australian and 53.3 British pence. So we've gained against the British pence.
Yeah, thank you, Madison. That is Madison Reedy with our business update. Scouts New Zealand and other groups say they are disappointed that victims of abuse in their communities won't be heard by the Royal Commission. They say the newly released terms of reference draw a number of arbitrary lines that exclude people in sports groups, as well as young people who have been jailed in adult prisons. Alex Perrottet reports.
The Royal Commission into Historical Abuse is the biggest inquiry ever undertaken in New Zealand. But the Commission itself says it needs to consult lawyers on just who is and isn't included in the complex terms of reference. Sexual abuse victims of former Scouts New Zealand leader Graham William Maureen, who was sentenced in February, will not be included. The Chief Executive of the Scouts, Josh Tabor, says he's disappointed.
From our perspective, it is a lost opportunity around shaping and giving voice to young people or to those victims and survivors of sexual assault who have a story to tell and want it to be heard.
Josh Tabor says the Australian Royal Commission was very successful, having a narrow definition of sexual abuse but a wide definition of institutions, while New Zealand's approach mirrors what was used in the UK, which wasn't nearly as effective. Michelle Mulvihill is a psychologist who was a consultant to Australia's Commission and says the New Zealand terms of reference have the wrong focus.
The terms of reference seem to be written from the perspective of understanding perpetrators, not victims. In other words, it's focusing on what victims can and can't do, rather than focusing on these are criminal activities perpetrated by adults. So it kind of turned it upside down, I think, and that's unfortunate.
Ms Mulvihill says the terms are vague even when it comes to the newly included faith-based institutions, such as whether abuse by a church leader outside the church premises would be included. She says all victims need assurances they will be heard.
And the Prime Minister said that in the press release. It says, yes, you will be included. But then you read Section 17 and it kind of says, maybe, you will be included, maybe.
Josh Tabor says he wouldn't be surprised if the terms were expanded again down the track as more people come forward with their stories.
It's hard to give two groups of people voice in a reconciliation process and exclude a third or fourth group of people based on the arbitrariness of where they sit. either the youth development or sporting sector, and that just seems like a haphazard approach.
And the sporting sector isn't rushing to put its hand up to be included. Peter Miskimmin, the Chief Executive of Sport New Zealand, says his organisation is undertaking a wide-ranging review that includes child protection, but he confirmed it won't be reaching back to look at historic cases. He says he hopes people who have been abused will come forward, but it's not in his mandate to find a way to facilitate that.
That is not up for us to do. I can only go by what we've been given the mandate to do. Any opportunity where people who have grievances in the past that want to bring those forward, I would support, but I can only deal with what we're dealing with here.
The terms also exclude any abuse after 1999, though the Commission does have discretion. Tanya Savitsky-Mead is the director of Just Speak, a group dealing with young people in the justice system. She says she's also disappointed.
Really problematic to exclude people. The most important thing is that young people who are disadvantaged from so early on in life by the very people who are supposed to care for them should be excluded from the inquiry. I think that would be a really terrible outcome.
The terms do include people abused in juvenile detention, as well as people in police cells or police custody, but not for people in prisons. Tanya Savitsky-Mead says in the decade to 1999, around 250 young people were given adult sentences, and there will be a similar amount in the decade that falls outside the scope.
So would have been in those institutions that are excluded, and their experiences in many cases will probably reflect similar things that other young people who are included have experienced.
She says if this inquiry can't address those people, there should be another one. Ken Clearwater from Male Survivors of Sexual Abuse says he's not happy that it's the lawyers who get to choose who is in and who is out.
It's going to come down to legal representation, legal understanding of it and things like this. It's going to be pretty complicated all the way through.
But he says groups like his who support victims and those working with them also need enough funding to continue their work.
People are going to be triggered, even those working within it. We're going to be carrying the traumas of hundreds, if not thousands, of men and women throughout this country, and it's just important that we get looked after just as much as so that we're able to deliver those services that need to be delivered.
The Royal Commission says its members are currently reviewing the terms of reference with legal counsel Simon Mount QC. The chair, Sir Anand Satyanand, will then come forward to announce its approach, including what falls in and out of the scope. In the meantime, Ken Clearwater says he doesn't see why the New Zealand approach has to be so different to Australia's without an apparent reason, while over in Australia, Michelle Mulvihill is resorting to another kind of psychology to get the Commission to think again.
It will take time. It will cost more money than probably has been allocated. But let's get the job done and let's do it really well. New Zealand's got a great history of doing things very well around the legal area. Let's continue that and let's do it even better than the Australians did.
For Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
The number one ranked All Blacks take on second place Ireland in a mouth-watering clash in Dublin this weekend, with the winner to claim the unofficial crown of world's best going into next year's World Cup. Six Nations champions Ireland are perhaps the biggest challengers for the All Blacks crown, and as Joe Porter reports, a previous Dublin defeat still haunts the hosts.
Aaron Smith scoops it away to Cruden. Here's Coles. What a pass! What a pass! Ryan Crotty scores!
Oh my goodness! Trailing 17-22 with time up on the clock, the All Blacks snatched victory from the jaws of defeat in Dublin in 2013. That loss still cuts deep for Ireland coach, New Zealander Joe Schmidt.
I am still bleeding from that. It hurts when that happens.
That pain was numbed by Ireland's historic win over the All Blacks in Chicago in 2016.
Drops it off to Henshaw! Robbie Henshaw scores it! Rugby history. Ireland beat the All Blacks for the first time.
Chicago was a great band-aid, and in fact it was a full bandage. It was great.
But Schmidt and Ireland are still desperate to beat the All Blacks on Irish soil.
It's always an achievement to beat the All Blacks. That's why we limit ourselves to just once every 115 years, because we don't want to get carried away with things. When they first turned up in 1905, they were incredibly tough to knock over, and I don't think they've changed too much.
The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen knows that and is stuck with the same side that beat England, bar bringing Ryan Crotty into second five in place of the injured Sonny Bill Williams. Last weekend's test at Twickenham felt like a World Cup final, and the Sunday's clash with Ireland should be no different, as the All Blacks try to replicate the pressure of having to win 2 big knockout games in a row, just like they will next year in Japan.
They hang on to the ball for long periods of time, probably the team in world rugby that hang on to the ball the most. When they don't get what they want with that, they'll take to the year, and they've got a good kicking game. So you've got to admire all of that. It's winning, and they'll punish you, they'll find a weakness, and he's pretty good, Joe, at finding a trick or two, so we'll be expecting 1 or 2.
Halfback Aaron Smith starts in what will be his 82nd test, surpassing Justin Marshall to become New Zealand's most capped number 9. Hansen says Smith has revolutionised the role.
He's a really passionate man, and he has a love for the game, and he's done a marvellous job speeding up our delivery of our ball and allowing us to play at a speed that has been uncomfortable for other teams at times.
And Justin Marshall says Smith has earned his record.
I couldn't think of a better person to do it, and a more deserved person. So yeah, unfortunately that's going to go from Wikipedia, so when you Google me now it's going to be gone. I did have a joke with Aaron the other day, and I said, well, you still haven't beat me on the tries, but that's simply because you weren't as greedy as me.
If Smith can help the All Blacks beat Ireland, he can be as greedy as he likes. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Joe Porter aho.
Well, it comes a little late for Prince Harry to attend, but if you're heading into Wellington's Cuba Street tonight, you're likely to find yourselves amongst a sea of redheads, the first national event of its kind. Everyone with tresses ranging from fiery copper to strawberry blonde is gathering outside Irish bar JJ Murphy's to celebrate New Zealand's first ginger gathering. Our reporter Laura Dooney is there and joins us via live view. Hi, Laura.
Hi. Yes, I'm here on Cuba Street. We've got about 20 people gathered here, ranging, as you said, from all spectrums of the red hair, from copper to auburn to strawberry blonde. They're gathered here to celebrate the fact that they have red hair, and the organiser, she wanted to make it a safe place for kids to come and feel like they could, celebrate being red-haired as well. As you can see, it's been hosted by Lily Loudmouth, who's a red-headed drag queen, and there'll be prizes here tonight, such as the palest redhead, the youngest redhead, and the best redhead. Now, in honour of tonight's celebration, I went out to talk to some redheads to see what their experience is like. Mandy Lahat and her 3 children, now in their 20s, all have fiery red hair. And all of them were teased as children.
Ranga, 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 that sort of stuff. So that's what my kids got. They go up, ranga, 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 ranga. And I got it when I was little as well.
And for the record, it's not all that funny to redheads when they're called those kind of names.
We now find it quite offensive. And we said, excuse me, what did you just call me? And I just don't like it at all. It's unacceptable to call other people other names. But it seems the redheads, they still think it's okay to say that sort of thing.
But Mandy Lahat says now gingers are becoming more fashionable and more acceptable, with people saying that her and her children's hair is beautiful. Yadvika Green says she's proud of her hair now, but used to hate it because she was bullied.
I've had everything from just name calling to being spat on, having bottles thrown at me. Growing up in Dunedin, that's just what it's like.
But a hairdresser helped convince Miss Green her strawberry locks are something to be proud of.
I went to try get my hair dyed once in my life because of it, and the hairdresser told me, don't you dare dye your hair, keep it the way it is.
Both Miss Green and Miss Lahat are planning to be at the Ginger Gathering. Event organiser Ashley Mackenzie White has been approaching redheads all over the capital, giving them a badge and encouraging them to come along. The proud redhead says tonight is about bringing New Zealand redheads of all ages together. Miss Mackenzie White says people seem to be drawn to people with red hair.
So you have to start to behave in a certain way. Like people want to talk to you about your red hair or touch your red hair or tell you have beautiful red hair, or they're really mean. And so it forms a character of who you are. Like I have to be brave and I have to be kind of confident because of the way I was treated growing up.
Bullied at a young age, she had a decision to take it or confront it.
When I was little and people used to say carrot top, it's like, well, first, carrots have green tops. And second, most of the people that would bully me had brunette hair, and so I used to say, well, at least my hair is not the colour of poo. I mean, that was as a 10-year-old, you know, that was my way of fighting back.
And all redheads agree, there's something special about being ginger.
When you go past with people with red hair, they go, you know, they give you that look.
Whenever I meet someone else with red hair, I don't know if I feel solidarity with them, but there's just a little moment of recognition that feels, it's a warm buzz that you get.
It's like the secret society with other redheads. It's just magic. You can't explain magic.
And as behind me, the group of redheads have just had their group photo taken to celebrate the inaugural Ginger Gathering. I've spoken to organiser Ashley Mackenzie-White, and she says if tonight goes well, this will be the first of many Ginger Gatherings for New Zealand.
Thanks, Laura. That's Laura Dooney, our resident brunette at the Ginger Gathering there in Wellington. It began as an easy way to feed hungry kids in Auckland, a communal street pantry or a pātaka kai where everything is free and everyone is welcome. But in 3 months since the first pantry opened, a nationwide movement has kicked off with nearly 100 pātaka kai now on streets from Whangarei to Christchurch. Schools are building them for their local neighbourhoods, and organisers say they're inundated with requests from people across the country wanting one for their community. Our reporter Nita Blake-Person and cameraman Nick Monroe went to check them out.
You may have noticed them popping up across Auckland or even Whangarei, Wellington or Christchurch. Old fridges, small sheds and big cupboards brightly painted and brimming with bread, fruit and veggies, canned soup and other goodies, all donated by the public or businesses, free to anyone who needs it. Each pātaka is unique, but there's a universal theme.
Don't be shy, grab a kai.
Swanee Nelson is the driving force behind the movement. She set up the very first pātaka outside her Otara home in August.
It's not a new idea because it's been happening in the States for a very long time, but the model that they use is called the Little Free Pantries. But being South Auckland, obviously we've got to do things 10 times bigger, so it's not so little, it's the big size pantry. And it really looks at how we used to do things pre-colonisation as Māori and Pacifica. Like this model is actually already embedded in us as a culture, but we've just brought a more modern approach to it by putting a literal pantry in the streets. Man, we're so lucky because somebody came in this morning and the food's still here.
The pātaka are open all hours. The idea behind them, leave what you can and take what you need.
All sorts of children, families. Sometimes it's just your two working couple, but again, just trying to live in our economy right now, even on 2 incomes, is really difficult. And then you've got your odd person too that maybe drives past and they forgot their lunch at home, so they don't have time to go back, so they'll stop and see if there's anything quick they can grab for lunch.
The pantries provide plenty of food for thought. Today, Swanee's talking with kids from Waimondley Primary School in Otara who are keen to set up one in their local neighbourhood.
We had to figure out a way that we could work together to help everybody on our street to get some kai on a regular basis. And the way that we did it was we thought, why don't we put our actual food pantry that we have in our homes and our kitchens, we'll put it out on the street and anybody can put food into it and anybody can take it out. So one of the cool things about my street with having a pantry too, which you'll find if you do it at your school, is a lot of people from the street and neighbourhood, they come and meet at the pantry and they get to know each other.
And there's no shortage of people hungry to help. When students at Ormiston Junior College in the Auckland suburb of Flatbush were tasked with completing a project for their community, they opted to build several pātaka.
I heard the word food, so I chose it because of that, and also because there's people out there who don't have the bare necessities that we all need. Like the housing crisis that we have in New Zealand is pretty bad.
I saw this on a YouTube video from a woman in England, and then when I heard we were doing it here, I was really inspired because I always love helping out the community and I just thought doing this would be really helpful for it.
I've learned that there's
people that are not just like watching things that are going bad in the world, that there's some people that actually come and help.
It's those people, the ones keen to help, who are responsible for the pātaka spreading across the country like wildfire. Swanee Nelson says people want to give back.
Things have changed. People are staying indoors more, people are a lot more private about things, and people don't socialise as much as they should. But when you see people, everyday strangers that you don't know, going out of their time and sacrificing things like this for people they don't know, it just really lifts your spirit and your morale, and you just feel like, man, actually our community does have the capability to work together. They do care about things. They just never had that one thing, that one bridge they needed to connect everybody together, and Kai is so great for doing that. You have people like politicians, MPs, local board members, everyday residents, business professionals, labourers, right down to your local car clubs and local gangs, all working together through this movement to supply kai for the collective community. And I think that's just like really amazing that it's been able to touch all those diverse groups within the community.
But as the popularity of the pātaka grows, she says more help is needed.
Like, this movement has grown so fast, and we just so need support now, like to build the infrastructure around it and to provide the right support for all our kaitiaki across the country. So we're actively at the moment looking for sponsorship or funding to kind of help us do that, because obviously this is a resident-led, completely zero-funded, apart from our materials of late, but in terms of people getting paid, nobody gets paid here, but it requires full-time workers now, it really does.
Swanee says another 120 pātaka are being whipped up at the moment, ready to be distributed to more neighbourhoods. If you come across one on your travels, the message from Waimonde Primary School is simple. I tāmaki makaurau mō te hōtaka o te ahi pōnei, ko Nita Blake Person, aho.
Primary school teachers have wrapped up a week of rolling one-day strikes with a call to arms. The Educational Institute held the last of the strikes in the Wellington region today. In a couple of weeks, its members will vote on whether to accept or reject the latest offer from the government, and they are hoping members of the Secondary Teachers Union, the Post-Primary Teachers Association, will join them. Our education correspondent John Gerritsen was at the rally in downtown Wellington.
There was something of a carnival atmosphere as hundreds of striking Wellington teachers marched to the city's Civic Square. They'd just finished an hour-long meeting to discuss last week's updated offer from the Education Ministry. It includes higher maximum pay rates for many teachers on top of a general pay rise of 3% a year for 3 years. Teachers at the meeting say it's not good enough. Alistair Button wants to hold out for a better deal.
I think the improvement is very slight, and I think unless there's a substantial improvement in the offer, we need to continue with our action. I think there probably is more money, there's a surplus, and they've also have various self-imposed restrictions on their spending that they could relax.
Amber Pullen says teachers are determined.
We haven't been offered anything that is yet solving our problems the way most of us see it. I speak for myself, but I don't think it's about the money. I think it's about the workload, and that's not being addressed yet. And we're just going to keep burning out, and it's not sustainable.
At the Civic Square, the NZEI's National Secretary, Paul Galter, had a strong message for the government.
This government has said no more. They've said, that's it. No more. We say to that, I say to that, we say to that, shame. What do we say to that? Shame. What do we say to that? Shame. What do we say to that? Shame.
And there was a special message for the Education Minister, Chris Hipkins.
9 years, how the time has flown. Make our demands true. All we want, Chris Hipkins, is
This week's strikes are the second time this year NZEI members have closed schools and sent hundreds of thousands of children home for a day. Despite the disruption, parents in town with their children because of today's strike were supportive.
We've got great teachers, and I think they deserve more. They deserve to be recognised more, and they deserve more remuneration.
They need basically more teachers.
Well, I supported for the teachers.
I support what they're doing. I don't know the ins and outs of the deal they've been offered, but I'm sure that the union is right when they feel that it's not the best offer for the teachers that they could get.
The Educational Institute's leaders are now meeting with those of the Secondary Teachers Union, the Post-Primary Teachers Association, to discuss joint action next year. Teachers at today's protest were buoyed by the prospect of teaming up with secondary teachers. Wellington Principal Janice Schramke says the government needs to pay attention.
We're determined that this isn't the end, it's just the beginning. And I really feel now with PPTA coming on board as well, it's going to be a very interesting 2019.
Teachers are now hoping the mere threat of combined industrial action in the new year will be enough to prompt a better offer from the government. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko John Gerritsen tēnei.
And time for some feedback now. Going back to our story about two North Shore schools that are stopping prize givings, end-of-year prize givings. This one in school prize givings are a way of acknowledging excellence, this person says, if they are not overpowered by sports awards. They don't include nice person, tries hard, is helpful awards. Nobody's fooled by these, she says. Even the parents are embarrassed. But they do include additional awards like for music, drama, etc. Welcome to the real world, kids. You'll be judged. And some people are better than others. That's from Judy, I think. Thanks, Judy.
RNZ News at 6. Kia ora, good evening. Ko Katrina Batanaho. New Zealand police say they're seeing an increase in illegal drug exports from North and South America. Nearly 200 kilograms of cocaine has been seized from a container of bananas in Auckland, the largest bust of its kind in New Zealand. The container was shipped from Panama. Detective Inspector Paul Newman says officials are doing what they can to protect New Zealand communities.
I think what you're seeing here is a targeting from South American crime cartels and gangs that see Australasia and New Zealand as a particularly lucrative market because of the prices we pay. They can afford to send large amounts and small amounts to our country, lose some and still make large profits.
Detective Inspector Paul Newman. A 41-year-old Australian man has since been arrested in Sydney following an Australian intelligence investigation into organised crime across the Tasman. Scouts New Zealand is disappointed that abuse in its organisation won't be dealt with by the Royal Commission into Historical Abuse. The government announced the country's biggest inquiry this week, but the Commission is consulting with lawyers to see who was included in the new terms of reference. Although it will now include faith-based organisations, the new terms exclude sports organisations, community groups like the Scouts, as well as young people abused in adult prisons. The Chief Executive of the Scouts, Joshua Tabor, told Checkpoint he's disappointed.
From our perspective, it is a lost opportunity around shaping and giving voice to young people or to those victims and survivors of sexual assault who have a story to tell and want it to be heard.
Joshua Tabor. The jury in the trial of the man accused of murdering Ashrima Chand has heard he was cruising down her street in a car around the time she was killed. Rohit Deepak Singh is on trial in the High Court in Auckland after pleading not guilty of murdering the South Auckland mother. Annika Smith reports.
Ms Chan was found stabbed to death in her Manurewa home early on November 12 last year. In a DVD interview with the police the day after her death, Mr Singh told officers he was driving down Mayich Road around the time she was killed. Sergeant Andrew Bell said it was an incredible coincidence he was placed in the area at the time of her murder and asked him to explain it. Mr Singh told him it was bad luck, that he had taken his regular route and insisted he didn't kill Miss Chant. Ko Annika Smith, Denay.
Primary school teachers and principals ended a week of one-day strikes in the Wellington region today. Schools in Wellington, the Hutt Valley, Porirua, Kapiti and Wairarapa were closed as members of the Educational Institute walked off the job. Teachers held meetings to discuss the latest offer from the government, which they'll vote on in a couple of weeks. Those spoken to by RNZ News says the offer is not enough and they'll vote against it. Meanwhile, the union's leaders are meeting with the Post-Primary Teachers Association to discuss possible joint action next year. The Education Ministry says it's hard to understand why they're doing that before voting on an offer which gives most teachers a $10,000 pay rise within 24 months. The death toll from California's most deadly and destructive fires has risen to 63, and the number of missing has dramatically doubled to more than 600. The campfire erupted a week ago and raged through the mountain town of Paradise to the north of Sacramento. The BBC's Dan Johnson is in Paradise.
Every day the news gets worse and the numbers increase. Officials had talked of 100, perhaps 200 people missing. Now they say, after thoroughly cross-checking lists, they believe there are 631 people unaccounted for. Paradise and its neighbouring villages were ravaged 8 days ago by California's worst forest fire. An electrical fault is one possible cause, but it was the hot, dry conditions and the warm winds that helped spread the flames so quickly, leaving little time to escape. The majority of the town burned. Close to 12,000 buildings were destroyed.
Dan Johnson reporting. 2 top officials of Cambodia's Khmer Rouge have been found guilty of genocide by a UN-backed court almost 4 decades after the regime which oversaw the killing fields was overthrown. The court said the former president, Khieu Samphan, who's 87, and 92-year-old Nuon Chea, known as Brother Number 2, were found guilty of crimes against humanity and genocide against the Cham Muslims and the Vietnamese. Up to 2 million people are thought to have died under the brief but brutal Khmer Rouge regime between 1975 and 1979. The verdict is the first official acknowledgement that what the Khmer Rouge regime did was in fact genocide as defined under international law. It's 5 minutes past 6. Sport, a 2-pronged spin attack is likely for the Black Caps as they head into their first test match in nearly 8 months. New Zealand play Pakistan in the United Arab Emirates tonight, and captain Kane Williamson says they'll wait and decide on the playing 11 just before the start of play. But it seems likely left-arm spinner Azaz Patel will make his debut alongside leg spinner Ish Sodhi. Williamson says the Abu Dhabi wicket won't have any surprises.
I had a little look. Yeah, obviously it's probably what you expect in this part of the world with not a huge amount of grass and perhaps offered the spin bowlers a little bit maybe later on in the game. So it looks like it has some fairly normal characteristics of a cricket wicket in this part of the world.
Kane Williamson. The test starts in just under an hour. Meanwhile, the former New Zealand captain Brendon McCullum and all-rounder Corey Anderson have been released by the Indian Premier League T20 side, the Royal Challengers Bangalore. New Zealand's newest sporting franchise, the Auckland Tuatara, making their competitive debut tonight, playing Perth in the Australian National Baseball competition. The New Zealand rally driver Hayden Paddon is in 4th place overall after 3 stages of the WRC season-ending Rally Australia. England have beaten the United States 3-0 in a football friendly in London. And Swiss tennis great Roger Federer has again made sure he'll be among the final 4 at the ATP Finals in London after outplaying South Africa's Kevin Anderson in straight sets. Federer has now reached the semi-finals for the 15th time in 16 appearances at the event. That's the news.
Genetic modification in agriculture has long been a fighting issue. But some of our top scientists argue it's time to consider GM again.
We have such big challenges ahead of us, we can't afford not to have the conversation.
But could it harm the economy and is it safe? This week on Insight, Charlie Drever investigates if there's a future for genetic modification in New Zealand agriculture, just after the 8 o'clock news on Sunday morning on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow, Northland to Taranaki, including Coromandel Peninsula, fine spells and isolated showers. Whanganui, Manawatu, the Central High Country, Bay of Plenty, also Gisborne to Wairarapa. Fine spells and isolated afternoon and evening showers about the Central High Country and the ranges of Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Wairarapa. Horowhenua to Wellington, cloudy periods. Nelson and Marlborough, fine today, apart from low cloud about the Kaikoura coast. Scattered rain developing tomorrow morning. Bulla and Westland, a few showers turning to rain with heavy falls from the south this evening. Canterbury, scattered rain developing this evening, easing to isolated showers tomorrow morning. Otago, Southland and Fiordland, rain today with heavy falls, scattered showers tomorrow. Showers possibly heavy in the eastern parts of Otago and Southland tomorrow afternoon. And for the Chatham Islands, fine today, becoming cloudy tomorrow. It's 8 minutes past 6 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. The question on everyone's lips in Britain as they wake up this morning is how long can the Prime Minister Theresa May last? She's facing a major revolt in her party over the terms she's negotiated for the UK's withdrawal from the European Union, and talk is mounting of a leadership challenge. All along, one of the biggest disputes has been the future of the border between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic, which after Brexit would be Britain's only border with the EU. As Emma Vardy reports from Dublin, it's a dispute which resonates on both sides.
Who's scoring here? It was a goalless draw as Northern Ireland took on the Irish Republic in Dublin tonight. But Theresa May's been trying to present the draft Brexit deal as a win for both sides.
It's not really Dublin's problem. So yeah, they can just sit and watch it all unfold in Westminster.
Best case scenario, Northern Ireland would be the Hong Kong of the UK. It's the place to do business if you want to do business with Europe easily, but at the same time without feeling like you've got difficulties actually within the United Kingdom.
The Brexit deal could keep Northern Ireland more closely tied to EU rules, so trade can flow freely between the north and south of this island. Some Northern Ireland businesses believe that's a benefit.
From first impressions, we thought it was business friendly. We welcomed the fact that we had open access to both the GB and EU markets.
One of Theresa May's closest allies came to rally support for her plan.
When people actually sit down and go through the detail, and it is incredibly technical detail, and they see the safeguards that have been put in place, and they see the way that the people of Northern Ireland have been put at the heart of this, they will see that this is the right deal for the United Kingdom.
But she's not cheering. The DUP leader, Arlene Foster, believes the draft deal severs the United Kingdom itself. And the decision to sign off on the Irish backstop has led to a political crisis at Westminster. Today, player after player in Theresa May's team have been quitting their positions. Many saying it is those arrangements for the Irish border that they can no longer support. It is the relationship between these two sides that's continuing to define Brexit.
Emma Varney with that report. The Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern is preparing to jet out of Singapore after a 3-day visit dominated by trade and security. And the security seemed to be at the forefront of the Malaysian Prime Minister's mind when he met Ms Ardern, immediately launching into a warning about the danger Beijing posed in the South China Seas. Journalists watching the formalities were ushered out of the meeting, and Jacinda Ardern later tried to play down Mahathir Mohamad's comments. Giles Beckford is at the Regional Leaders Summit in Singapore and filed this report.
As with most big conferences, it's rarely what's on the agenda that holds the most interest or the most importance. For Jacinda Ardern, this summit's been about promoting the free trade message and allying New Zealand closely with the broad Asian political trend of multilateralism, or more importantly, pushing against the go-it-alone policies such as those put up by the United States. The high-level meetings have come thick and fast. China's Premier Li Keqiang, Australia's new Prime Minister Scott Morrison and Myanmar's Aung San Suu Kyi. And they've all come with their own agendas: trade with the Chinese, deportation of Kiwis with the Australians, human rights and the plight of the Rohingya refugees with the often vilified Myanmar leader. But for a little drama, it was down to the 93-year-old veteran leader of Malaysia, Mahathir Mohamad. In the manner of most bilateral meetings, media were allowed in to witness the handshakes and opening remarks. But Mr Mahathir got down to business even before the niceties had ended, raising the vexed issue of Chinese activities in the South China Sea, and we all strained to hear.
New Zealand is quite far from the South China Sea. What happens to the South China Sea will eventually have some effect on all the countries.
The anxious look on the faces of some of the New Zealand delegations showed that mention of Chinese warships and threats to the region in front of the media were not welcome, and so we were all ushered out in quick fashion. Ms Ardern says Mr Mahathir's warning wasn't aimed at New Zealand, and nor was she trying to limit media coverage.
What the Prime Minister of Malaysia was saying, he's said in plenary, so pretty public information. It's obviously tradition that you capture the beginning of a meeting, and then at some point there's a point where the media withdraw and we continue with the meeting.
Mr Peters looked particularly perplexed and talked to your Chief of Staff, and then we were asked to leave.
Oh, well, I didn't notice that part. Obviously I just turned around and gave a little nod that now was probably the appropriate time for us to get on with the meeting.
A little buzz was created by news that United States Vice President Mike Pence had requested to be seated next to Ms Ardern at a leaders' dinner. What could they possibly have to talk about?
We'll probably have a conversation about trade or trade issues more generally. But I'll see where the conversation goes. But I will bring up steel and aluminium tariffs. It's in New Zealand's interest that I do.
After 3 days of whirlwind diplomacy and regional power meetings, not to mention flying the flag with local businesses and touching base with youth, Ms Ardern is off to the APEC Leaders Summit in Port Moresby. She'll be rubbing shoulders with many of the Singapore Summit participants. New Zealand's contributed $15 million to help PNG stage APEC, although Ms Ardern will be there less than 24 hours. PNG's handling of arrangements has been controversial, notably its spending of millions of dollars on top-of-the-range Maserati saloons to transport the leaders. Ms Ardern says she won't be riding in one.
No, I will not, and I've been advised that I'll be travelling in a Toyota Highlander, I believe.
For Checkpoint in Singapore, I'm Giles Beckford.
And let's return to the story about the Auckland primary schools. It's Silverdale School and Stella Maris Primary. They're on the Hibiscus Coast. Both of them have scrapped their end-of-year prize giving because they don't want to upset the kids who miss out. Now, this has really piqued your interest on both sides of the fence. So, some of your feedback. What is the matter with New Zealand? Why are they picking on final prize-giving assemblies where people are acknowledged for their work and achievements during the year, this person says. Another one, my daughter is no good at sport, so doesn't win sports prizes. She is good academically. Surely all children should be recognised for their strengths. New Zealand schools seem to value sports excellence, but not intellectual achievement, that person says. And this one is saying that kids should get used to being judged because that's the way it works in the real world. She goes on to say you're not going to get a job for a nice smile unless you're a receptionist, and a footnote to that one. She says, and you should know the meaning of trivial long before you sit a level 3 exam. And that's a reference to the NCEA history exam where some of the students are objecting to the use of the word trivial in the question. On the other side of the coin, this person says, are prize givings in primary schools a Kiwi thing? I don't remember prize givings in any school I attended or taught in the UK. Really, it's not needed, this person says. If you ask children what their memories of primary school was, I don't think it would be receiving or not receiving a prize. Keep your feedback coming. We're really interested to know what you think on that issue. You can tweet us on 2101 and email us all the normal ways. We would love to hear your thoughts on that. Immigration New Zealand is being accused of providing inefficient and substandard services since shutting its drop-in centre. The department says it's receiving 60% more calls than it can handle, and that's meant average wait times have hit nearly 3/4 of an hour on their phone lines. Who's got time to wait for 45 minutes on a phone line? One customer told RNZ yesterday it took 2 days for him to speak to a representative. Eva Corlett reports.
Richard Small is an Auckland-based immigration lawyer with more than 20 years' experience. He says Immigration New Zealand's decision to close its global offices and its front counters here is putting pressure on contact centre staff. And those staff are being expected to give detailed advice on complex questions.
I appreciate the work the contact centre does, but it should be limited basic advice and information in a clearinghouse. It is not suited to give in-depth immigration advice. We are hearing staff way out of their depth in these calls. The worst example was where someone was told that they were liable for deportation when they weren't, the partner of a New Zealand citizen, and they went back wrongly to their home country.
Another experienced immigration advisor, Arunima Dingra, agrees the quality of advice coming through the call centre is questionable.
You would have the same question answered in the first call with a different answer, and then you ring them again, you'd get a different answer. So, we as a practice do not encourage our clients to ring the contact centre at all. I would much rather a client go to the website and see the information themselves and read it, or we tell them that you ring the contact centre 3 times, and if you get the same answer all 3 times, then there is probably some weight in that answer. But that's a major issue.
Richard Small says the online system is useful, but it can't do everything. He says drop-in centres must be reopened so people can get the advice they need. There's just one left in the country, in Auckland, but it will close at the end of the year.
When I visited that the other day, it was packed. And yet we'd been hearing how almost nobody was using them, how they were really unnecessary, and that, so once you've invested yourself in a particular change, I think that the facts tend to fall in behind.
Changes to post-study work visas are due to kick in from November the 26th. Aruna Madingra says the changes are good, but she says for migrants the lack of information is causing confusion.
I've got no qualms in saying that it is all over the show. I mean, you imagine that a poor migrant who studied here invested thousands of dollars, and I'm talking about $30,000 plus in New Zealand. If that person doesn't know what's going to happen to him in the next 2 months, imagine the anxiety that person is going through. Imagine what the family is going through. They don't know if they have to sell off their car, sell off all their belongings and go back, or if they actually need a job offer.
Peter Elms from Immigration New Zealand says it's a peak time for visitors and students to be applying for visas, and that's what's pushing up demand, not drop-in centre closures. But he says 70% of calls come from people within New Zealand wanting to check up on the status of their application.
Many people still want to contact us in advance of that date of completion, and that's where the volumes come into the contact centre. That's what causes the delays. So a little bit of this is about actually customer education. It's about telling people, please be patient, bear with us, but we will be in touch with you if we need additional information.
Mr Elms says Immigration New Zealand is working to move most of its services online as quickly as possible. He says staff are well trained and do the best they can. Ko Eva Colette Tenne.
Saudi Arabia is keen for international attention over the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi to fade away. But today the US imposed sanctions on 17 people over his killing at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul in Turkey. It's the first concrete response by the Trump administration to the killing. Earlier, Saudi Arabia's prosecutor said he was seeking the death penalty for 5 of the people involved. Here's the BBC's Caroline Rigby with more.
Killed in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, apparently by lethal injection. In a news conference broadcast live on TV in the Kingdom, its deputy public prosecutor laid out yet another Saudi narrative of the killing.
The way in which the crime was committed has been discovered. It was after a struggle, a fight, and the administering of a lethal injection, which led to his death.
An official revealed Jamal Khashoggi's murder was ordered by the head of a negotiating team sent to persuade the journalist to return from exile, but that the Crown Prince knew nothing about the plan. A view echoed by Saudi Arabia's foreign minister.
This was a rogue operation. We have a better sense of what happened. This was individuals exceeding their authority and going beyond their mandate, and these individuals made a tremendous mistake, and for this mistake they will pay a price.
And that price became clearer today. Prosecutors revealed they've charged 11 suspects over the murder and are seeking the death penalty for 5 of them. The United States also appears to be stepping up its response to the killing,
imposing sanctions on 17 Saudi Arabian individuals for serious human rights abuses resulting from their roles in the killing of Jamal Khashoggi.
They include key aides of the Crown Prince, as well as the Istanbul Consul General, who, following Mr Khashoggi's disappearance, allowed cameras into the consulate in an attempt to prove the journalist was not inside. The US has not pointed any fingers at Prince Mohammed himself. Although it is eager to hold those responsible for the murder to account, the Trump administration will also be keen to tread carefully to preserve the important strategic relationship between the two countries.
Carolyn Rigby there. New Plymouth residents fear there will be another freedom camping free-for-all this summer after a council bungle, which means its freedom camping bylaw has been sent back to the drawing board. A temporary ban has been lifted and now freedom camping, including without onboard toilets, is again permitted in all but a handful of locations. Our Taranaki Wanganui reporter Robin Martin has more.
Last summer, the Waiwakaio River mouth was inundated with as many as 120 freedom camping vehicles each night. This infuriated some locals who were forced to sidestep rubbish and witness campers going through their morning ablutions at the single outdoor shower. A revised bylaw was meant to put an end to this. It promised to ban freedom campers without onboard toilets from coastal reserves and move them next to public toilets in town. A small number of self-contained campers would be allowed on the reserves. But the submissions process identified a glaring omission in the bylaw. It didn't reference the Reserves Act or the Council's own Coastal Reserves Management Plan, which, although somewhat toothless, already banned camping on reserves outside of official campgrounds. Fitzroy resident Christian Slack, who was one of more than 830 submitters to the bylaw, spotted the mistake. It surprised him.
Particularly as there's a group, obviously Local Government New Zealand and the various councillors and the Mayor have been to symposiums and presentations and meetings on freedom camping. So I would have thought this would have been fairly high up the agenda. Most of the other freedom camping bylaws that I've seen for other districts contain reference to the Reserves Act and other restrictions and prohibitions as well.
Mr Slack says the council doesn't seem to have been aware of Local Government New Zealand's Good Practice Guide for Freedom Camping.
In this document, which was from April of this year, it makes it quite clear that freedom camping is prohibited, or any camping is prohibited on a reserve land which isn't designated as a campground.
Mr Slack says if the council wants to permit freedom camping on reserves, it needs to reference the Reserves Act in its submissions process and potentially change the Coastal Reserves Management Plan, meaning a lengthy public consultation process. New Plymouth Mayor Neil Holdham admits it's a fair cop.
Yeah, look, I mean, they've made a mistake. Ultimately, we want to learn from it, and we don't want to make mistakes, but every organisation in New Zealand makes mistakes. We accept that. That's just the nature of the beast. Is it acceptable? Well, I think I certainly am not really interested in a blame culture. I think the key thing is that we've learned from it.
Mr Holdham says freedom camping rules are complicated, but he's confident council staff will have a workable solution at the end of the month.
My understanding is that we'll get a report based on all of the information that our officers are compiling that will present us with a range of options and a recommendation on the 29th, and that we'll be in a position to make a decision that reflects what the community have told us, the situation that we face, and making sure that it's compliant.
At the Waiwakaio River mouth this morning, locals were not happy at developments.
Well, you never know your own rules till they're tested.
They should have had it sorted straight after the 31st of October.
Well, I think they would have a person who's that should know those bylaws.
I find it bullshit, personally. Why don't they open up Fitzroy Motor Camp, give it to them a little bit cheaper where they've got toilets, showers?
Lena Kaufmann from Stuttgart in Germany was in one of about 30 freedom camping vehicles at the river mouth this morning. She says the Campermate app recommends Waiwakaio.
We were just looking in the app and it said it's for all kind of vehicles, so we supposed it's okay, but we were not sure. No, we didn't know that there was another rule before.
Ms Kaufmann says the river mouth is the perfect location, and she could understand why locals would want to limit the number of freedom campers. Council staff are due to report back to an extraordinary meeting of council on November the 29th. I ngā mutu mo te hōtaka o te Akipone, ko Robin Martin-Aho.
Well, the story that we've been running this afternoon about the primary schools on the Hibiscus Coast who have scrapped their prize giving because they don't want to upset kids who miss out has really sparked a major debate. Now, this one's come as a surprise to me, and I want to hear if you've had this experience. 2101 on the text, if you've got more details. At our state primary, this person says, the awards are totally subjective and parents of children who don't receive a prize are specifically not welcome at prize giving. Really? This person goes on to say, so who is the prize giving for and what exactly is the purpose? For parents of successful kids to gloat and to be part of an exclusive club? The kids don't care about the awards at that age. It should be a celebration of every kid's efforts during the year. Things are different at high school where it can be assessed objectively. Have you ever been turned back at the pass at your kids' prize giving because your child is not getting the award? I want to hear from you. 2101 on the text. And this other person says, not only do children need to learn, they cannot be the best at everything, but also to be gracious and pleased for others who do win. Maybe we should give a prize for the best feedback. Maybe that's a little controversial. Anyway, a painting by the British artist David Hockney has sold in New York for just over $90 million US, making it the most expensive artwork by a living artist ever sold at auction. Portrait of an Artist, Paul with two figures, was painted in 1972 and is one of Hockney's best-known works. With the details on the auction, here's the BBC's Russell Trott.
The shimmering blue water depicted by David Hockney, forming the focal point of arguably his most famous work, Portrait of an Artist, Pool with Two Figures, one of the 20th century's most recognised and loved pieces.
Oh, there it is.
A tense auction room then, as the world of art, like the subject matter, held its breath. Then the shock and amazement, and not a little relief, as it became the most valuable work of art by a living artist ever sold at auction. Back in the early 1970s, David Hockney worked 18 hours a day for 2 weeks to complete it. Now at the age of 81, very few classic Hockney pieces ever come up at auction. The sale beats the previous record at auction for a living artist by more than $30 million. The record for a painting by a living artist was sold privately and not at auction for around $110 million. But record or not, this painting still makes a splash wherever it's seen. A modern masterpiece by a modern master.
And just before we go, some more feedback on the prize giving, the scrapping of prize giving at 2 primary schools in Auckland. This from a teacher. I'm a primary school teacher and can tell you the anguish I go through to select the 6 out of 28 or 30 children to receive an end of year prize. After a year in class together, you develop such fondness for the kids. Yes, they all deserve a prize, but I have to say I agree with your correspondent who said it is usually only sports that gets recognised throughout the year. I'd like to give my end of year prizes to children who show integrity, emotional intelligence or great progress. Selecting the 6 is yet another example of how difficult the job of a primary school teacher is. Thank you for all your feedback. Couldn't get to a lot of it today because there was so much. Appreciate you joining us. We will catch you again next week. That's Checkpoint.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. New Zealand police are seeing an increase in illegal drug exports from North and South America. Scouts New Zealand is disappointed that abuse in its organisation won't be dealt with by the Royal Commission into Historical Abuse. A week of rolling one-day strikes by primary teachers finished in the Wellington region today. The death toll from California's deadly fires has risen to 63, and the number of missing has doubled to more than 600. The UN-backed Khmer Rouge Tribunal has for the first time found 2 leaders of Pol Pot's regime guilty of genocide. And Sitividi Rangbuka's Soldepa party is leading as final counting continues in Fiji's general election. Our next news and weather is at 7.
RNZ National, with a fresh take on the day's news at 10 every weeknight with Karen.